now. Thank you everybody for coming along. Today I thought it would be a good idea to go over in Unity prefabs and overrides. It's nothing to be afraid of, but I would like to ask, does anybody use prefabs as their normal Unity workflow anyway at the moment? Are you aware of what they are, how they work, what the benefits of them are? Yeah.
Yes,
To be honest, I've not really touched them much.
Okay.
I use them sometimes, but not very often.
Okay.
It's great when you got a lot of objects of the same thing and you got to repeat it.
Absolutely, yeah. That is the main benefit. So when you've got things like such as trees, for instance, and you've got the same tree all over the place, you might want to just set your tree up exactly as you wanted, at the right scale, with the correct materials and anything else. And once you've got it set up the way you want it, you would then create a prefab. So all a prefab is like a recipe or a blueprint for an object. So it's not the actual mesh or the FBX file itself. It's basically just a recipe that says we want to use this object, we want to apply these materials, we want it to be this scale, we want it to have a script attached, we want it to have a collider, anything like that. And once you've got your actual object made, you would then create a prefab, and all you have to do is drag that prefab wherever you want it in your world, and it's got all those different components set up ready to go exactly as they should be. But there's also something called overrides, which I'm going to go into, which you may or may not find useful. For instance, if you've got, as Kurt says, one object which is all over the world, for instance, and you want to change the material on it, you can just change the material in the prefab. You can test it on an object and it'll show up as an override, and if you're happy with it, you can apply that override and it'll apply it to the basic prefab. So all the objects will update at the same time. And I'll go into that. So I'm just going to do very simply to start with. I've got a few materials set up, all different tiles, just so you can kind of see what I'm talking about. I'll use them in a moment. But we're just going to start by bringing in a basic cube, if I can, because for some reason something is tugging on the wire on my mouse. Give me a sec. There we go. I'll just reset the transform so it's in the centre.
Your mouse has a wire.
It is, yes. It's a wire mouse. It is. Came with me PC, me old PC, many years ago, and I love it, and it still works, and I think, what's the point of getting a new mouse? And I'm too mean to pay for batteries, so yeah. If I can get anything done for free, I will. Anyway, here we go. We've got a basic cube. Let's just say we want to transform this cube a little bit. We'll make it maybe a scale of, I don't know, maybe a half on the X and maybe a half on the Z even. We've got a little bit of a pillar going on. Yeah, I'm not going to do anything fancy with it. It's got a collider. I'm quite happy. Let's just assume this is a little bit more complicated than it is and I've added stuff to it and whatnot. And yeah, let's just say we've added a material to it, so it's kind of white tiles at the moment. Now what I can do is I can create a prefab out of that, and then anywhere in my world I can drag this prefab and I've got all these different instances of it, or I can duplicate it as we've done before and just have several of them all close together. Whichever way you like to do it is absolutely fine. There's no right or wrong way. And these are all identical. You can select your prefab and view it either by hitting this little arrow on the side of each object, and it'll open up your prefab. Everything else is kind of whited out, and it brings up your object inspector here. So you can make any changes to the prefab if you wish, just by changing it here. And you'll see when we come back out, all of the objects have changed. If I didn't do that to the prefab, then only the object I've dragged the material onto would change. You can also open your prefab by hitting select as well, and that'll bring that up. So I could put yet another material on. It'll change all of these, but it won't change this one, because this one has an override. We've already added this white tile material to it after the fact.
Where did you do the override?
Just by dragging this on here.
Oh, that. Oh,
That's
okay.
it.
So you don't
It's
have to use a
overridden.
thing called overrides.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You don't.
You
Have to
can
use
have a look at
different
your
override.
overrides here, and if you click on Mesh Renderer, you'll see here the one that's got the white tiles has got a little blue line next to it, meaning it's been changed. It's not the original prefab. And in overrides, if you hit Mesh Renderer, you'll see there's a little blue line here, which shows you that it's the material that's changed. Nothing else has changed, just the material. And you've got the option of either reverting it back to the way it was, to the original prefab, or you've got two buttons here, or if you open up the Mesh Renderer, they're at the top here, you can apply it, apply to prefab cube, and when we apply it, they all change, because they're all using the one prefab. If you find...
So if you don't do it in the right order, can that cause you a problem? Like if you start duplicating, and then create a prefab, is it too late then? You have to create the prefab first, correct? Or
well, if let's just delete these, and let's just have a play and find out, shall we? So we'll get rid of that. I haven't got a prefab anymore. We're literally going to start from the beginning. We've got a cube, which I'm just going to recenter because I'm funny like that and I hate things being off center when they first come in. We've got the cube, we've given it a material, and we've created a prefab. To create a prefab, you literally just drag it from the hierarchy into your project folder.
right, I'm saying before you even do that part, before you drag it in as making a prefab, you just take that cube and duplicate it a bunch of times and then create the prefab. Is it only going to do it on that instance that you dragged in, right? It's not going to do it for all the other ones, I assume.
No,
right?
it's not.
So
if I was to duplicate this...
duplicate it, yeah, a bunch of times, right?
Yeah. It's only going to create a prefab out of that one and not that one.
So then the other ones, anything after that won't be included. Okay.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
Now then, I honestly don't know. If
I'm totally missing something here, maybe it's just because my first ever session in here. I don't see, all I see is screencast up in front of me. I see nothing shared. Do I have to join something else?
Are you on Quest at the moment?
Quest 3.
Quest 3. What I would suggest you do is try hitting the power button. Just press it once. Not a long press. You're not going to turn the headset off. It'll just turn your screen off. It'll go black. Press it again, and it'll basically turn your screen back on and re-render everything. So yes, the screen should show up if you do that.
Oh, there it is.
Yeah, perfect. Okay. So what was that? Oh yes, I was busy trying to figure out if there was a way of applying a current prefab. I honestly don't know if there is. What I would probably do is bring in another prefab. I would go to this one, hit transform, copy component, bring in the prefab you've just dragged in, transform, paste, component values, and then I can just get rid of the cube that's not a prefab, and then these are both linked now, so I can drag that onto there.
That should be better for memory, correct?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Utilization. That should be better for memory utilization then, because it's linked to one prefab then, as opposed to all separate ones.
Possibly. I don't honestly think that prefabs have a huge impact. At the end of the day, the main thing is these are all using one mesh. The only difference at the moment is really the material. So anything that's going to take up memory rendering a mesh and rendering different materials will have a bigger impact than prefabs, which are literally, I mean, we can open that, you'll see. The prefab is 3 kilobytes in size. It's nothing. It is literally just a tiny little packet of data that tells it how this mesh should be rendered, presented, what materials, where it is, things like that. Nothing. It's nothing that's really, unless you've got literally millions of objects, but I think you'd be having issues anyway if you did. In a world that size, I wouldn't worry too much in that respect, but it's really more for improving your workflow. There's nothing worse. I've done it myself in the past, and there's nothing worse than finding that you've just placed 150 of the same object. You've just duplicated this mesh and placed it all around the world, and then decided, actually, I want to change the material on them all, and you've got to go and find each and every one and change it. And if you just made a prefab of the first one in the beginning, you could have done it all with a click. So it is really, really, really useful. That's all I can say. You'll find out when you start making big worlds with lots of duplicated meshes. You'll find it absolutely invaluable. And another...
Can you use it for like point lights or
You
anything
can.
like that? Because
Yep.
I had
Everything.
that issue with point lights. I had them all over the place, and I had to go into each individual one to reset them, and it was driving me nuts.
Yeah. Yeah, you can use it for point lights, you can use it for reflection probes, you can use it for everything. Every single asset that you use in your world. I could even make a prefab of this direct light here. So I might say I want it to be baked and important and whatever, and I just create a prefab and there it is. Not that I would want to add several direction lights into a world, of course. You would normally only have one, but it's just to highlight that you can actually do that. If, for instance, I had deleted everything out of my world, at least I can bring in my original cube and my directional light as well. And it's exactly as I said, baked and important are the only two things I changed. So it saved that in the prefab information. Now there is another thing you can do. I'm just going to... Now this is where my age comes into it, because I've completely forgotten what I was going to say. Oh yes. There absolutely is another thing you can do. If, for instance, let me just do something with this default cube. We'll move it on the Y by, say, 5 meters. And we'll reset the origin. So the origin is here. That means that if I rotate it, it rotates around the origin point. And let's just export this. I can't remember where I've put it now. What did I call this? Prefabs and overrides was my little project name. So let's find that. And I'm just going to call it cube. Oh. Let's just get rid of my prefabs. I did put it in there, didn't I? Where is it? Oh, I haven't exported it, that's why. Right, there we go. There's my cube. We'll just delete. I'll unpack, actually. This is another thing as well. If you delete a prefab and you see this red, it means it's because it's trying to link. It says here, a missing prefab. If you unpack it, it disconnects it from that prefab reference.
That's how
and
you
it's
fix
back to the way it was. Yeah.
Nice.
you can either just unpack something which will unpack the top level. If you've got an asset which has got several prefabs all nested under one another, so there's a parent, you can also do unpack completely, and it'll unpack everything below it as well, all the children of that asset. So that's worth knowing. But yeah, we've got a cube with no material, so we'll just give it a material anyway. Why not? And we'll bring that in. And there it is. And let's just say that I want to have several of them rotated around. I mean, it doesn't have to be rotated. You could have them anywhere you liked, but I'm just going to create a prefab of it. And then we'll duplicate it. And I have no idea how many am I going to do. Let's say 360 by 60. That'll do. And we'll just duplicate that and make it 120 and 180. So you can see I'm just making a circle of cubes here. We'll make that minus 60 and minus 120. So we've got this circle. If, for instance, I mean, this is entirely something you can do, and I really don't see an issue with it. What you can also do is, that's our initial cube. You can drag all these in here and create original prefabs of these. Or we can create prefab variants. Now, I've never played with prefab variants all that much, because normally what I do is that when my whole world is complete, I literally select everything. Let's just get rid of that camera. I literally just select absolutely everything in my world. And in fact, let's get rid of that. And that's all going to go red, but I don't care. Drag all of these in, and we've got all these prefabs here. And the reason I've done it that way and done a separate prefab for each item, because I know I'm happy with it. I might have started with one prefab and I'm 100% happy that my world's finished. What I can then do is, if I decide to move things around or delete things, or for some reason I lose everything. Let's just say something horrible happens and I've lost everything, and I think, oh my God, I've got all my assets, but I've got to start rebuilding my world, and I don't know how I'm going to cope. It's going to take me weeks. That's happened before as well. Thankfully, because you saved all your prefabs, they're all still there. Oh, and I didn't bring in me directional light. Because each and every one of these prefabs has got the transform saved on it as well.
My solution to that was just I would create another scene name. You know, periodically create a new scene, you know, like do number 1, number 2, whatever.
Yeah.
So that if I do screw up bad, I can go back to an older scene at least and have some kind of backup.
You can do. Absolutely. That's a very, very good way of doing it as well. Usually what I'll do is I'll have one folder called prefabs, and I literally just put everything in there, and then I can, if I wish, just bring in certain parts of my world, or I can use these, I can have these appear as part of like triggers, scripts, have just certain items appear and disappear. So yeah, that's just my way of working. It's not something that most people would do. As I say, the best way probably is creating incremental scenes, definitely.
And you can have a prefab of prefabs, correct?
You can have prefab variants, yes. So you might want something based on your original prefab, but you're just making one tiny change to it. So yes,
But
essentially.
if you made a parent of all those cubes, and then made that a prefab, can you do that?
You can.
Yeah.
If I was to create an empty parent, I could technically make a prefab of that, and you can see even on the icon it's got all 6 items in there. If I was just to delete all of those, it works perfectly. Yeah.
Yep.
However, now what we've got is a nested prefab, isn't it? Because we've got this prefab, which is the game object, and then each one of these is its own prefab as well. And this is where, if you wanted to unpack it, instead of just choosing unpack, which would just unpack the game object, and you can see that the icon's gone clear instead of blue, you would choose unpack completely. Let's see if I can undo that. Is it going to let me undo? Yes, it is. You would choose prefab unpack completely, and it's unpacked everything. So they're all disconnected from the original. So I'm just going to get rid of all of those, and I'm going to unpack that. So we're back to kind of square one. Look at that, all my cubes have vanished. Oh, let's just delete that. That's because I deleted the game object prefab and it wasn't referencing them anymore. So let me have a quick look at my notes and see if I've missed anything. So yeah, each and every instance of a prefab is basically just like a clone of each other. And I've discussed overrides. I'm happy to go into more detail of overrides if that's not quite sinking in, because it took me a little while to get the gist of it. But basically, oh yes, there was another thing I wanted to cover as well. Last week I covered using GitHub Desktop as a good way of keeping a backup of your project. And I know a lot of people now, or more and more people, are getting into using third-party plugins for Unity, such as Bakery and Amplify Shader Editor as 2 examples, because, well, you know they're the 2 I use. I love them. But what you find is with the free plan with GitHub is there's a limit to the project size that you can upload, and by the time you've got Bakery and Amplify installed, that's already taken up all your space, or it might not even upload with those 2. Especially if you've got, for instance, the Amplify shader pack installed, which is a massive file. That'll fill up your space. And you might be having difficulty. It'll be timing out when you're trying to back up your project, for instance. And so there's something that I do. Oh, that's another thing. But if you bake your lights as well before backing it up, it's going to back up all your light maps, and they can be quite sizable. So what I do is, let's just close this and I'll show you on a project that I've been working on. And I call it Life. You'll see I've got 2 things here, Life and Uploader, and you'll see why in a moment. Now this is a work in process. It's far from finished. But basically, I've got like you're supposed to spawn over here, and then you walk down this corridor, and it's supposed to be like on a space station kind of thing. So I've got a spacey skybox, and yeah, it's like the last tree, trying to save the last tree, which is why I've called it Life. And I want to do something awesome with particles, like firefly things around the tree maybe, and lit up quite dramatically. But I can't really, I can't back up anything at the moment like this, because well, in my other one, because I use bakery's not installed, so I'm not going to bake the lighting. Amplify's not installed. I'm actually using a separate project to make me shaders, which I've just called Amplify. And every shader I make gets saved in there to reuse later on. But this is just the basic thing, and this is what gets backed up onto GitHub because there's nothing added to it. It's just the very basics. I mean, I've got more materials there than I need, more textures than I'm actually using. I just bring everything in, play around with it, see what works, and leave everything else there in case I decide I want to use them. So there would be probably some textures here that I'm never ever going to use. In fact, I think I've got two trees. One of them's an OBJ and one of them's an FBX. I'm not going to delete the OBJ even though I went with the FBX because it could be useful at some point. But obviously all of that is going to be backed up. But what I do when I'm ready to bake it and upload it, I go into my scenes and under my sample scene, I'll export the package and I export it into my uploader project. And I just hit X because it happened to be the first key I hit, and I just override it all the time. Overwrite it rather. So I'll save that. Yes, I want to replace it. And once it's compressed,
you're exporting back over the same scene, or?
I'm just exporting that scene and nothing else.
Well,
when you export it, you see,
name? Right.
When you export it, it will package everything that scene uses up. So all the materials, all the objects and everything else, and the actual scene file itself. So you can have a look and make sure everything that you use in the scene, and none of the extra stuff will be exported, just the stuff that you're actually using in the scene will all be packaged up. And then it asks you where you want to package it, what name you want to give the package. So I've just called it x.unity package because that's what I called my first one I ever exported for this project, and I exported it to a different project, which is my uploader
directory. Yes, different
project.
Yes, definitely different directory.
So it's not my life one, it's my uploader one, and I just stuck it into assets. This is a good way of cleaning up your project as well. If you've got a load of stuff, you can export your Unity package, delete everything, and then unpack your Unity package, and you're left with only the stuff in your scene that you actually need. If you're just wanting to clean up all the extraneous stuff you're never going to use. But you've got to be 100% sure about that, of course, before you go deleting everything. So anyway, we'll open up the uploader project. And this is the latest one I did with the bake. Wasn't happy with it. I really need this tree lit up better, so I'm going to be putting some light sources in and stuff like that. But for now, this is it. If I scroll all the way down, there's my x.unity package, the name down here. If I double click on that, it will overwrite some stuff. It's actually adding in an area light, which I decided to delete, so I should have deleted it from me first. Anything that isn't ticked or doesn't have the option to tick, it just means it's already in and you've got the latest version currently in this project. Anything that's changed and is newer, such as the scene file, that will be ticked anyway. So you can just hit import and reload. We've lost all our lighting, obviously. Go to bakery and just clear the baked data. And then we're back to the unbaked version, ready to bake again. And this is the one that I use. This one, I've got bakery installed and I've got the Banter bundle builder installed. So I know that I can't accidentally build the wrong one. So I'm building in my life folder, and that's the one that gets backed up to GitHub. And then I'm baking my lighting and building the actual bundles itself in the uploader project. And this uploader project I can reuse for all. I can be working on multiple projects, and it doesn't matter which one I'm working on. I would still export it to here, open it up, build it, upload, done. Or bake, build and upload. That's just the way I like to work, but it doesn't suit everybody, but I would recommend give it a try, because you might find it really does improve your workflow. And one of the troubles I have is confusion. If I've got too much stuff to consider, too many things in me folder here, too many things in me scene, and I've got to think, oh, have I baked it? Have I done this? Have I done that? Whatever else. I get myself in a right state, and then I've done all of that. I've baked it and I've uploaded it, and now I can't back it up because it's too big, and I've got to start deleting the light map files and everything else, and it just does me head in. So I just stick with me basic build project, and then me GitHub desktop. It will always know. It tells you straight away when you open it up if there's any changes in your repository. But you can see my current repository is life. It's not uploader, it's just life. So I can have a look on GitHub itself, and I haven't got anything installed that I shouldn't. You know, I haven't got the Banter SDK or Bakery or anything. There's no other folders in there other than my scenes folder and all my assets. Nothing else. So I'm literally backing up just the bare basics. There's no reason why you need to back up everything, you know, all the bakery stuff and all the amplify stuff and everything else, because they are just plugins, and it's a lot easier just to do it this way than to have to start
But you would need to reinstall those if you wanted to use it. The project, you have to reinstall those packages.
No.
For Bakery and for Amplify, right?
No, because I've got them installed. Well, Amplify I've got installed in a separate project. I could put it in here. But I've got Bakery and the Banter SDK installed in my Uploader project, and that's the only place I need it to be installed, because I would...
you're using that to bring it in. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep, okay,
So I've built my project in my life project. I've then exported the scene and brought it into Uploader, and from here I will bake the lighting and the reflection probes, bake the occlusion, build the bundles and upload them, and it's done. And then I can forget about it, close that and get back to my life thing. So this is where I do all the memory heavy stuff and creating all the big files, but this doesn't get backed up because I've got all of these installed. And the trouble is with GitHub, as lovely as it is, it's got a git ignore file, but you have to actually go through this and decide which files you want to be ignored. And to actually ignore all of the bakery stuff and all of the amplify stuff, it's a pain. It recognises Unity files that you don't need to back up. So when you create your repository, you're given that option of adding a git ignore folder, and you've got a little drop down list, and you choose Unity, and it knows which ones to leave behind, but it doesn't know to leave behind and not back up all your bakery files and everything else. So it's a lot easier if you're going to use GitHub Desktop just to do all that other stuff in a separate project, in my opinion. And it's not a difficult thing to do. As I say, you've... let's just get that life one open again. It's literally just a case of right-clicking on your scene and exporting it to whichever project you're going to use to bake and upload. Literally as simple as that. export package. It's the easiest thing in the world to do, and you just choose it. It chooses the upload, I think, because that's where I export it to all the time. But yeah, it's definitely something worth trying, because I know a lot of people. I know at least 2 people who I spoke to on another platform that will remain unnamed, who are having exactly that issue. I tried to use GitHub. I can't back up my project because it's too big and I'm going to have to pay for a plan, and I don't want to do it, so I'm not using GitHub. It's rubbish. You can work around it. You can do it for free. It doesn't need to cost you anything. Just do that. So yeah, that was something I just wanted to share with you in case anybody wasn't really familiar with the issues with the size limit, project size limits and stuff. Another really good thing you can do as well is to export assets or groups of assets as well, if you want to bring them into another project, which is probably why I don't even remember doing it, why I've got these 2, Bark and Blossom. I can probably delete those now, but I'd better not, just in case. But yeah, it's ever so easy. As I say, you might... Could be, probably because I've got the materials set up on this tree. Yeah, so I know this isn't very good. You would never have daffodil flowers on a tree, but I thought they looked nice, so they're staying. But daffodil flowers and maple leaves. But there you go. It's sci-fi. It can be anything you want. So exactly. The tree... The tree, if you wanted to export that, you would create a prefab of it. That's your tree. And then you would export that as a package. And you can see the tree uses bark, blossom with the flower textures, maple leaves, the different shaders that I've used, and then the FBX. And I could export that. And let's just see, tree. And it would literally export it, and it's called tree.unity package. And I can bring that package into any project I like at all. You just double click it once it's in your project, and away you go. It doesn't. You don't even have to drag it into the project, to be honest. You can just, as long as you've got your project open, you can just double click it, even if it's in a different folder, and it'll install it. Oh, it's not going to for me there, because my default Unity editor has a different version. I really need to change that. But yeah, the other way is to actually drag it into your project folder here, and then it will already start to export, unpack it, except it won't, because it's the same project and the tree's already there, so it tells you nothing to import.
And you can also do it the assets way too in the menu. Assets import package.
It's the same thing. Yes, absolutely. Assets import. Yep. Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. It's just that I happen to just do it this way. Usually,
just
I
so
just drag
somebody
it from the
needs
folder
to really know what
in.
it's doing. That's what it's doing.
Yeah, it's exactly the same.
Drag and drop can be like, you really need to know what you're doing when you say drag and drop, and it's doing a bunch of things in the background. That's a little more clear for people. Yeah, it's the same thing. I forget about these menu items, because I never use them. Right.
I always use shortcuts and dragging and dropping and things like that. Exactly. I never use these. Extract from prefab. You see, I don't even know what that does. If I select that tree, shall we try it? Oh, sure. It doesn't do it for that. What about this? Assets. No, I don't even know what I've done now. Extract from prefab. Not a clue. Not a clue. I had to have nothing selected for that to be there, and then it doesn't do anything. So you see, this is where you should probably look things up online and know what you're talking about. Shall we look it up? Unity extract from prefab. There we go. Unity discussions. Try to marking prefabs and models also game object, but this option is always disabled. Yes, it was for me. Extract material button again. Yeah. Ah, okay. So maybe it's like the OBJ or the FBX. You've got to select where you've got your materials.
You got an FBX file that gives you those extra options in your inspector because it's an FBX file. But I was trying to help somebody the other day, and they clicked on it, and it's an FBX file, but it doesn't come up with the options. It doesn't. It's weird. And you don't get the little.
So it doesn't have
play
these
button
buttons
next to the
here.
object either. No, it doesn't have that. No, and it was just, and I was like, why? It says it's an FBX, but I guess it wasn't, or I don't know. It's just weird.
Yeah, that is a bit weird, actually. I think what I would probably do is try opening it up in Blender first to see if it actually, you can import it as an FBX.
Right. Yeah. And then have you ever used compression on your meshes in the FBX thing?
I have done, but I don't really like Unity's compression. Usually what I'll do is I'll decimate or, you know, actually manually simplify the mesh in Blender first and export that. Because all the compression. Sorry, what?
Right. Have you run into problems doing it with their compression?
Yeah, I just don't like what it does with it. It's yeah, it's just like a bit of a janky kind of decimation. It just makes things look weird.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I know a lot of people use it. I think it's some people use it for their LODs rather than manually creating different meshes in Blender and exporting all of those. They'll actually use mesh compression for their LODs. I think I'm right in that.
Right.
And I just don't like the way it looks. I'm just funny like that.
I didn't know it did much. I didn't know it did something visually. So.
I mean, to be honest, I don't even decimate stuff. Normally in Blender, I very rarely use decimate. I'll usually simplify the meshes myself by hand. So I'll go through selecting certain edges and dissolving them and things like that until I've got down to the number of faces I want. And that way I've got more control because I can still try and maintain the original shape of my object rather than just letting Blender do its own thing, and it could be God knows what I'll get at the end of it all. So yeah, that's maybe I'm just a bit anal about stuff. I mean, even unwrapping UVs, I prefer to do it all manually rather than using any smart UV project or anything like that. Because
where are the UVs stored in a file? Is it because it's not a material, right? It's part of the mesh, or
Yep, it's saved along with the mesh information. So basically, you've got your let's just do something a little bit more than a cube, so you can kind of see what I'm talking about, I guess. Just select all of those, and then I don't know. Don't know what I'm doing here. Extrude along normals, perhaps. Yeah, let's just do that. That looks interesting. That'll do for now. So we've got something that's a bit more than a box. If I was to use Smart UV Project just to have Blender do this automatically, you can see here we've got UV maps. You can actually not have any UV maps and you'll still have a mesh. But when you create a UV map, you're basically creating a flat version of this. So it'll store this, which is your actual geometry. Every single one of these points has information, which is basically where it is in the world every single point and what it's connected to. But then when you create a UV map, it's not really what I wanted, is it? Your UV map is where you've essentially cut your block up, cut your object up and into manageable pieces that you can lay flat, and you've ironed them all out onto a flat piece of paper, and then this is where your materials, your all your textures, you can either paint on this or
where they get assigned, yeah.
Yeah.
But for that file itself, that UV map file with the picture in it, when you transfer it out, is it transferring out as its own file, or is it part of it? Is it wrapped up in something else?
It's part of the model. When you export it as an OBJ or an FBX, it's included in the model.
Okay.
So, for instance, this one, I really, really don't like the way this is unwrapped, because I like to try and keep as many pieces together as possible. So these bits in the middle, let's just turn on sync so you can still see them all. This is separate from these four sides, and I might want to keep these four sides joined to it so that the material kind of flows without any obvious seams. So what I would normally do is I would mark that as a seam, so it's going to cut that bit away, mark seam, and then these edges I would, no, that's not right, press shift, Lisa. I would take these edges and mark them as seams. So if you can imagine, when that's actually, that piece is ironed flat, everything else is janky, but that bit that I've cut out is exactly as I want it, and I can put a single texture on there, and there's no obvious join where the texture doesn't match, because it's all going to flow properly. So this is one of the reasons why I like to actually do it myself, unwrap things properly. Even this outer bit I would do differently. I would probably try and keep all of this as one piece, to be honest, which shouldn't be that difficult to do. What I'm going to do is just turn on live unwrap here, and then turn on tag seam when I use, there we go, and you should be able to see it unwrapping properly. I'm not going to bother doing the little corners in these inner boxes. I'm just going to get them cut away so you can see what I mean. But this bit I would try and do as one piece, so I'd probably start with that and that and that, and then maybe just do the top corners perhaps. Would that work? And it's just a case of playing around until it kind of looks like it's going to work properly with a texture. And that doesn't look too bad. If I was to select just that bit there and go into face mode so you can see, that would actually work quite well when you get a texture on it. So it's,
I don't know why the other ones look skewed. The other boxes there.
Yeah, it's because I didn't do these inner corners.
Oh, okay.
So they're not lying flat. Hey, there's another one that's looking good. You just go through each one. That one's still looking a bit wonky, isn't it? What have I done there? It's probably just because I haven't unwrapped everything yet. Have I missed any? I must have done. Yeah, I haven't done that one. And then I've got this piece here, which I'm not sure where that's meant to go. There we are, you see. That isn't meant to be cut. There. There we go. And if we were to give them a little bit of space between the islands so I can see them all a bit better. And that's actually unpacked pretty nicely. That would texture really, really well like that. And then again, you're going to have more than one.
Do you use GitHub with Blender at all or no?
Not usually, no, because quite often my Blender files can be absolutely massive. Like really huge. I remember, I'm sure Bart will attest to this, when we were building the Video Game History Museum for Altspace, we had a file that was well over half a gig, didn't we? It must have been, at one point, I think it was getting on for a gig in size, which was...
yeah, definitely.
It took ages to load, didn't it? And my poor old PC, my last PC was like... you could hear that it grinding away and steam coming out of it and stuff. It was like really complaining. So yeah, there's no way I would back that up to GitHub. That just wouldn't work. But yeah, again, the other thing to remember as well is you can have more than one UV channel, and if you're going to be making your own light maps and not doing Unity's own light map channel, which I would recommend you make your own, because Unity's is absolute rubbish, garbage. You literally just add another one and then just adjust the pattern. If you find that you've got some light bleeding, some light overlap, you just give it a bit more padding in between your islands, which you can just do with pack islands and increase that a bit more. Give it a bit more space, export it again. You don't have to delete your original one in your project, just overwrite the one in your project and it'll update in the scene instantly, and then you can rebake and try again. I find that the best way anyway, just to prevent those dark spots that you often get where the shadows are bleeding from one island to another. And I think I haven't got any baked in here at the minute, have I? Because I went and cleared it all when I unpacked it. Yeah, but when you're in your inspector here, once you've baked your lighting, you'll have like a little picture of the light map. And you can actually open that up. And there's a section called UV. There's a little drop-down menu that says UV overlap. And it'll highlight in red anywhere where you've got issues, so you know where to fix it in Blender. It's not difficult to do. But I have covered that before. I know a couple of weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I concentrated on lighting and light maps and how to get the best out of it. My video is up there, but I'm happy to go over it and see if I can, if anybody would like me to cover it again and discuss it. I think that could be quite useful for anybody who might be struggling with lighting. We've literally only got a minute left of the session though, so if anybody has any questions, I always worry that I've flown ahead, but like I say, I do try and cram as much information in as I can, and the video is always there, well, when this one's uploaded, for you to go over in your own time.
Thank you.
As I say, no questions? If we've no questions, I can end the stream. It's not a stream, it's a recording. I say that every week.
It's funny. It's the first time I saw my name in print above my head in the video.
There you go.
I knew I put color to it, but I didn't ever know what it looked like.
Yeah. Red and yellow.
Yo, wel dat Lisa.
Am I?
Yeah,
What do you mean?
what you knew. Not your normal avatar.
Well, I can see me. I've got me oldie t-shirt on.
Oh, you finally appeared to me. You were the basketball for quite a while. And
Oh,
now you
okay.
appeared
Yeah.
finally.
Yeah, you're
It's a
still the
glitch in
bald
Banter.
Yeah. Let's just end the recording. Thank you everyone for coming along.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank you.